All right, welcome to the Create Invent podcast. This is Jeremy Cook, as usual, with Pat Regan, and we've got a special guest today named Windell Oskay. Today is May 10th. We wanted to make sure to say that for posterity. But Windell, how are you doing today?
Great, thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, Windell has written a excellent book called Open Circuits. I got to take a look at this yesterday, and it's really fantastic. It's basically a book where he takes apart him and his co-author Eric Schlaffer. How do you pronounce that, Windell?
Schlepfer.
They take apart electronics and basically they show them to you. So it lets you understand things in the same way as you might, if you took apart a toy or something, except you don't have to go through all that trouble. He's taken apart, almost 300 pages worth of parts and stuff for you with explanations, and it's really a fantastic book. I mean, both the authors are very well known. There's also Ken Shirriff. I might be mispronouncing that name too.
Yes, Ken Shirriff.
Ken Shirriff. He's did the technical reviews of this, and I saw in the acknowledgments Brian
Benchoff.
Benchoff. Okay, very good. Anyway, now that I've butchered all those names, what can you tell us about this book that I haven't already said?
So the book is a tour through all kinds of electronic components. Looking at them from the outside, looking at them from the inside, discussing about how they work. It's sort of a tour of the history of electronics in a way as well, because we're showing vintage and classic electronic components, including things like vintage resistors and capacitors, but also things like a slice through a cell phone circuit board and a modern cell phone camera, trying to show just what the range of electronic components is. And one of our focuses on the book is on the aesthetic properties of these, because you're getting to look at some really marvelously designed things that you just never get to see.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, just step back a little bit. You're what is your background exactly? I believe you own a company that you run with, family-owned company, I believe.
Yes, my wife and I run a company called Evil Mad Scientist, and we principally make pen plotters, but also things like soldering kits. My background, I have a PhD in atomic physics, and I worked for a while at the National Institute of Standards and Technology on atomic clocks. And after that, I went to work for a company for some years building scientific instruments, and now I build instruments on my own.
It's nice to know that the person who wrote this book is really, you're really into electronics. You're very, you're the perfect person to write this book, I guess is what I'm trying to
Yeah,
get
I'm
at
definitely
here.
I'm feeling underqualified now, all of a sudden.
What's funny is Eric is a electronic engineer and has such vastly higher skill than me at almost all of these electronic components, which, I know a lot, but he knows so much more that I feel like I'm in your shoes there by respect that he has designed chips, and I have used them. So it's really a different world. But I think he and I have very complementary skills that worked very well to both find some components that were very interesting to talk about, and to talk about them from different perspectives. One of the big challenges in writing a book like this is that you have so many different audience members. You have people who don't know anything about electronics and want to see this photography book. And you also have experts, the people that did design those components. And you want either one of those groups to be able to pick up this book, look at that, say, hey, that's really cool, read the explanation, and nod just a little bit and say, yeah, okay, I get it, or yeah, that's basically correct. And
Right.
So it's a really hard challenge.
Well, yeah, I guess that's one thing, looking at this book, my background is manufacturing automation, I guess is the best way to put it. And I just look at this, and the way you've described all this, you really go into, I wouldn't say you go into depth on that much on the process and how they're made, but you do go into how it's made for, I don't know, 300 something, hundreds of components, I'll just put it that way. So it's, how were you able to get all of this info? This must have taken you a massive amount of time.
Yeah, it was a very long process. We sort of had an interruption in production because we sort of shut down work on the book for a year because of COVID and various interruptions in life that happened because of it. But we sort of spent essentially a year doing photography and less than that doing the writing on it. We wrote a little brief blurb about each thing, and we had an excellent editor from No Starch Press who worked with us through the process and made us explain everything. He kept saying, I don't understand what that word means, and I don't understand this. Explain it better. And so we just had to keep going at it and hammering at it. And Eric and I sometimes spent hours in a video chat hammering out a single paragraph because it just had to be right.
Well, yeah, that's an interesting thing you bring up, because I was, going through this book, and admittedly, I didn't read the whole thing. It's about 300 pages. And, I think it'd be a great encyclopedia type reference. But I came to a word, and it was surmet, and I was like, well, I think that's a typo. But fortunately, I looked in the back, and there was a glossary, and it explains exactly what that is. So was that your editor's idea to put the glossary in there? Because I think that's a fantastic little touch.
Yes, it was our editor's idea, and it took us a little bit beyond our intended and contractual page count to put it in, but it seemed like a good idea. It was the very last thing we added to the book.
Okay, well, it's appreciated. I mean, myself, I don't have the same knowledge as the two of you, but I feel like I'm perhaps more competent than an average. Certainly more competent than the average person, but just the amount of terms and stuff that get thrown out there, it's very nice. It's a fantastic reference, I think. Just the book and the glossary in general, I think that's great.
It's really a great challenge to try and address that wide audience that I referred to, and jargon terms are one of the hardest parts, because we use jargon for so many reasons, including precision of what we're describing. That we don't mean a ceramic, we don't mean a metal, we mean a surmet, a composite of the two. And sometimes you just have to use the special word that means the special thing.
Yeah, that's something. I do. I write about technical issues kind of before my, most of my living these days, and it's interesting having to try to, sometimes you're like, okay, that's that word, I need to go ahead and define that, because I like to do that. But sometimes it's even hard to even find what like HDMI means. I think it's what something definition media anyway, even stuff like that, even stuff that's common. And then other terms, they've literally transcended acronym status, and they're just now, I can't think of a good example, but there's some terms that, like, well, it used to stand for this, but now that this company owns it, it just stands for the word itself.
There are quite a few of those. We actually had to do quite a bit of research to really explain how some of the things work, and there are questions that we initially thought that one thing was the explanation for it, but it turned out to be completely different. An example was the question, why is there silica in the epoxy of a IC? So if you have a integrated circuit in its DIP package, it has all these legs, it has this black plastic package. The black plastic package, if you etch away the plastic, what you're left with is a lot of sand in there, essentially fine refined silica that is in there. And what I had been told many years ago was that was in there for the thermal properties to make it better thermally conductive. It turns out that the reason that it's in there is to match the thermal expansion coefficient of the epoxy package so that it doesn't stress the wire bonds to the leads when the package changes temperature. And there are all kinds of different things that are used to as packaging components or packaging composite materials to match different expansion characteristics as needed for different levels of performance. And this is a whole world of things I didn't know anything about, but we had to look that up and learn the truth and really understand it and be able to write a very short explanation of it.
Yeah, those wires that go from the pins on a dip to the actual tiny integrated circuit, I've seen those chips, dissolved and and you just see the wires and they are so tiny, like little hairs in there. Even
smaller
in the
than hairs sometimes.
Stuff. Yeah.
One thing I thought that was interesting, maybe I knew this in some, what's the word? Some vague sense, but you pointed out that a lot of the time these components are separated basically between a connection property the packaging, which is like like basically like a box, and then the active component. And you pointed out nicely that a lot of the times the active component is a fraction of the rest of it, which is kind of mind blowing for even for me who kind of knows it, but it's like, wow, it's interesting to hear it just pointed out that way. Just
one of my favorite examples are LEDs. That you can have a 10 millimeter LED that's this big chunk and jelly bean. You can have a 5 millimeter bog standard instrument panel LED. You can have a surface mount LED in a pretty big 1206 package. You can have one in a tiny 0603 package. You can have an 0402 package. And these things are getting down to the size of a grain of rice. But the actual active component, the actual LED die in all of these things is the exact same thing.
Yep.
It's just how much plastic do you have and how big are your wire leads inside the thing. And that all relates to what technology are you going to use to assemble this into something else.
What's pretty neat is the NeoPixels, the WS2812 LEDs. You could just take a magnifying glass and you could see in there. You can see the 3 colored LEDs and the microchip that controls the LEDs, and you can actually see it in there. I think that's kind of neat.
Yeah, I think you guys have done some fantastic work. Obviously, I guess you talk about it. You say some people like this, they're beginners. Some people know what they're doing. Some people maybe it's an introduction to this for them. But then you also say that some people like it as a photography book. Do you think some people buy it with no interest in electronics and actually just look at it for the photography? Which
I was the photographer of the book, so I sure hope so.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm at a bit of a loss. I don't have the book. I know Jeremy's gotten to leaf through it. I haven't gotten to. I've only seen the little snippets of it on your website, the couple of pages I can look at.
Maybe he'll let you borrow it.
I hope so. I might have to order a copy. But it looks like it would be a fantastic coffee table book, just to have it in the house for people to pick up and leaf through.
The pictures are fantastic, and I do appreciate the end when you guys actually went through and showed how you photographed everything. I think that was a nice touch. Was that another late edition, or was that?
No, that was actually in there from the very first pitch for the book, that we were wanting to talk about the process of making it. We did some really non-obvious things. We took components and we cut them with everyday tools like sandpaper, but also with more exotic processes, including a diamond polishing wheel, a diamond wafering saw, a gigantic milling machine. And the process of doing macro photography itself is really interesting. We used a process called focus stacking, which is where you take a bunch of photographs at different distances from the object, where each has a slightly different focal plane. The thing about macro photography is that when you take pictures of things super up close with high magnification, you get a very shallow depth of field. Only a very narrow part of the thing is in focus. And this is very much a regular part of everyday experience. You're really used to that. But there's new computational techniques which are really cool that can take a bunch of photos with slightly different focal distance and stack them together. More or less, the software looks and says, okay, this part of this picture is in focus, this part of this picture is in focus, and so on. And that's just a matter of combining them together, like stitching a panorama photo together to make one synthetic image that looks 100% real and contains, real photographic information, but is more than is optically possible.
And you probably nowadays don't even have to know which order the photos are stacked in when you give it to the software. It probably just figures all that out.
I think the order does matter.
It is still
I think
important.
I have confused it and screwed things up.
Yep.
So you just feed these images, I guess properly ordered images, you just feed them into the software and it spits out a nice image for you? That's pretty awesome.
Much. I wrote some custom software to control. We had a custom motion control stage to move the camera to different positions. It was actually built from one of our pen plotters that we manufacture.
Oh.
So just sort of custom hardware, and it's not necessarily the cheapest or easiest way to do that, but it is what kind of stuff I have around. So I wrote some software for that moved the camera to different positions in a sequence over time, took the photograph and saved them all to a folder, and then I take all those photos in the folder and bring them into a program called Helicon Focus, which is a purpose-built focus stacking software package. And it has tons of different settings and approaches for different types of photos. There's different ways that you can do this, and there's different regions that it defines for how large of an area it's looking at to be the in-focus area and so on. So it has things that work well for different types of things. And just to give you an example of one of the types of problems you come across is, suppose you have some very fine wires in the foreground of a photo that are in focus. It's very tricky to define those very narrow regions as the in-focus part, because you have areas behind them that become visible, become in focus later at a different depth. So you can get different effects, sometimes great, sometimes terrible, by picking the parameters for the focus stacking process.
Now, am I correct in assuming that this focus stacking software is probably not cheap?
If I recall, it's a couple $100.
Okay, well, for what it is, that seems like a bargain. Actually,
it's esoteric, and for us, for this project, it was a great deal.
I guess in your business, you've got you, your wife, and the cat. What was his name?
That's Zener.
Zener, yes, Zener. Now, apparently, the cat hair gets on these photos sometimes. Is that because I photograph my projects, and yes, I've noticed when I do macro photography, our dog, I guess it's from our dog, I see hair on it all the time, and it's really annoying. So, can you comment on that?
We didn't let the cat in the photography room during the project, but okay. Nonetheless, there were objects moved through the parts of the shop where the cat goes, and it's often the case that you don't see a hair on a circuit board until after you've gone through all the photography and the focus stacking, and you're at the super macro. It's just so much time cleaning parts, and you can get things that are visually clean, but they're not microscope clean. And it's different processes.
Yeah, I sometimes take a close-up photo, and it's not a hair, but like a little fuzzy or some little piece of must be from a shirt or something, that you can't see it with your eyes. But then you blow up the photo, and you're like, my goodness, there's looks like it's a 3-inch piece of something on there. That's
right. And so there was a lot of times we had to reshoot photographs, a whole lot of time cleaning, and we had, for materials, for samples that aren't that delicate, things like an entire circuit board or something, you can use a spray of pure isopropanol, a toothbrush, and compressed air. And that takes care of almost anything. But at times we had, we'd sand a component in half and down to very fine, super polished sandpaper, 10,000 grit. And now you clean it off as best you can, and you put it in a microscope, and there on that wire bond is dust from the sanding process. You can't scrub that with a toothbrush, you'll just obliterate it. So what do you do? And the answer is, well, you can try repeated cycles of things like water, alcohol, gentle compressed air or canned air. For some things, we spent some time cleaning them under a microscope with a extremely fine brush made out of a single cat whisker. So there's just
really?
Well, if you want to clean a wire bond without bending it, you try that sometime.
I probably won't, but I'll take your word for it. But that's did you custom make this? Did you clip a little?
Cats sometimes drop whiskers, so why not use one? Yeah, there's actually a picture of it in the book.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that is awesome.
So, and even after cleaning, there's still always some dust in photos. So every photo had a little bit of retouching. And primarily that was spending time in Adobe Lightroom with the spot removal tool, removing individual spots. It's a fine line. There's a for the most part, you don't want to use the heavy-handed retouching tools because you want stuff to look like what it looks like. But we just sort of made a decision that we're going to do spot removal as best we can to preserve what your visual appearance of the actual object is. For some things, that meant leaving dust that was there preserved in 50-year-old varnish in place. And for other things, that meant, get rid of a whole lot of dust that was on this IC sensor that showed up during the cutting process.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting thing because once you get into photography, it's kind of like it's like, oh well, we want this to look real or but then that's kind of like becomes philosophical. Well, this looks bright to me, but it's and then you get into something like that, macro photography, where you're, well, is this dust here in context or is this out of context dust, or I imagine it was quite a nerve-wracking experience at times.
At times, mainly just tedious, but it's okay because the results are good.
Oh yeah, for sure. Now this book came out, let's see, I think a few months ago. Is that correct?
Last fall. Yeah.
Last fall. Now, how has the response been? Has it been a pretty good seller, or has it?
Yeah, it did great actually. It sold out the first printing, and it's on the second now.
Very nice.
That's fantastic.
So happy to have a book that gets a second printing.
Yeah.
How have the Kindle sales been? Because I personally think that I'd much rather have the book for this, but
surprisingly good sales of the ebooks, but I really think this deserves the full color, and at least the full color PDF or ebook version, if not the printed. Our No Starch Press did a phenomenal job. They really spent the money to get the printing to look great, and I'm so happy with that.
Yeah, it looks fantastic, and I'm if you're watching this on YouTube, it's nice and orange, which I appreciate, and I'm sad that my good camera wasn't working today because I can't really show this up in the same way that I.
Well, you could take a nice photo, Jeremy, and paste it right into the video. Yeah,
and actually, I guess I should mention I'm going to do a review of this for embedded computing, so you can. I'll definitely have a photo or two of that on there. And if you're unsatisfied with the pictures, that's a good place to check it out too, or on Amazon, I guess, or at EvilMadScientist Laboratories.com. Is that right?
It's EvilMadScientist.com. Okay. Our store is shop.evilmadscientist.com, and the website for the book is opencircuitsbook.com. And so the website for the book does have pictures of the book cover, but also a large number of photos from the book, as well as a large number of outtake photos, things that just didn't make it into the book.
Yeah, and I guess I was looking on your website. I don't know about. I guess it's on the the opencircuitsbook.com. Correct? Am I?
Yes.
Okay. On that site, I guess I'm assuming you can get a signed copy there too, if you so desire. Is that?
Yeah, that's correct.
How did you get the idea for this book?
So Eric and I have been collaborating on projects for, I think, more than 10 years now. We have made some soldering kits together, and the most famous of these is the 3.5s kit, which is a discrete circuit 555 timer kit, which is a soldering kit to build your own 555 timer. And we have through-hole and surface mount versions of the kit, which are sort of scale models of the through-hole and surface mount versions of 555. We also make a 741 op-amp soldering kit in the same way, both in surface mount and through-hole versions.
That's awesome.
We also have another collaboration ongoing, which is a discrete 6502 processor called the Monster 6502. And you can read about that at monster6502.com. 6502, I should say. And that is a enormous project to make a replica of the 6502 microprocessor, the same one that was in the Apple II computer, for example, and the core CPU of some of the famous processors, including sort of the core of the original Commodore 64 and NES, with some little asterisks for the exact chip packaging, but the basic core CPU is the same thing in those things. So we have a project to make one of those with just many thousands of transistors on one giant circuit board.
My goodness.
Anyway, Eric had started posting on Twitter some cross-sections of photos, cross-section photos of components a few years ago. And he had, sort of mediocre quality photos of them, cell phone, and they were really interesting, and people were really responding well to them. And I said, "Hey, Eric, you want to do a book on these?" And I'm not sure he quite understood the gravity of what I was asking, because it's a really big project.
I feel like nobody could understand that. Maybe you did.
This is my second book, so I really should have known.
Okay.
Well, just for my understanding, it's a 300 and some odd page book. Like, how many of these macro photographs are? Not an exact number, but they're close to 300, or half that, because there'd be one on every other page or so.
It's something like that, yeah.
Okay.
So some subjects have 3 or 4 photos. Many of them have an illustration. Many of them have just a single photo. We also prepared and sampled probably 100 other parts in addition to those that are in the book that didn't make it into the book for some reason. And those reasons included we couldn't find a good context photo to show a picture of this component in. We really wanted to show things not just up close, but with something to give an idea of scale or how it might be used. Some of them are ones that we tried and tried again cutting into, but we couldn't get a good enough cut that looked really clean inside, that really looked great. And one of those would be a reed relay, for example, that we had reed relays and we cut them open over and over again, and we just could not get one where all the wires cut through and the glass capsule and all the things looked just right to be good enough to go in the book.
Yeah. And how long from idea to publishing, how long did it take? How many years? I guess it was several.
About 3 years.
Okay.
Of which sort of there was a year of not working on it at all in that process, just because we sort of put a pause in the book when COVID hit. And there was a year of sort of editing and almost a year altogether of waiting on different things. So it was actually more or less a 1 year of writing and a 1 year of editing.
Okay.
1 year of writing, photography, sample preparation, and a year of editing.
Were you able to easily find all of the hardware, or did you spend a lot of time hunting down auctions on eBay trying to find the one remaining something?
There are parts I'm still looking for. No, we worked with a online spreadsheet and a huge list of all the things we wanted to find, and we did find a lot of them, but we also a lot of them did come from an eBay auction. The isolation amplifier, for example, was one that I got on eBay, and just a magnificent piece of ancient hardware that they don't make anymore. But we also had a family member lent us a old guitar amplifier that we were able to look inside at the circuit boards and the glowing tubes and resistors and things. And we also rummaged through our last Silicon Valley surplus store before it closed and found all kinds of components and rummaged through the bins of different shapes and sizes of, say, film capacitors to find just the right one to photograph. So there's a lot of different approaches.
So, it's funny. We had a book author on a couple episodes ago. One thing I asked him, and I'll ask you, now that you've written 2 books, would you write another book?
Yeah, but I need a cooling off period to yeah.
It's not exactly what he said, but something similar to that, if you remember, Pat, I think.
I don't, but you've been thinking about this and I haven't, so I'm
I think, well, my engineer brain wants to say it wasn't the same thing, but trying to be a little less literal, he said roughly the same thing, I guess. So, Well, listen, we've had a great conversation about your book, but I was thinking it'd be awesome to ask you about your main business, Evil Mad Scientist Laboratories, and maybe talk about some of the projects you're working on. Maybe talk about some of the projects that Pat and I are working on as well. Is it's cool with you? We'll go ahead and take a coffee break for a little bit, and we'll be back and we'll discuss some of that other stuff. That sound good?
Sounds great.
All right, we'll be back. All right, we are recording.
We are recording. Welcome to the coffee break, Jeremy.
Yeah, welcome yourself. The coffee break is where we give a shout out to our top 5 or so patrons. Our top 5 or so patrons. Well, first of all, we got Carl, then Michael Sizer, Raptor, creatively spelled, Stuart Morrow, Brian Moses, and of course, Positive Waves. We appreciate you guys supporting us. And yeah, Pat's doing something with his hand, making a shark thing or something. I don't know.
I'm doing
we appreciate that. And, thanks for supporting us. If you want to support us, Pat, where can we go to?
Patreon.com/createinvent, all one word.
Yes, it is indeed patreon.com/createinvent.
We like money, Jeremy, but we don't need to have money. We would love to just hear from you. Leave us a comment or a like or a thumbs up. All the different platforms have different ways to do this. Send us an email. Stop by our Discord server. There'll be a link in the description probably in most places.
That's true. A little bit of business. We're trying to rearrange our YouTube channel a little bit to make sure some of the stuff is slightly more in order than it is before. So if you notice getting a bunch of notifications that we put out a new video.
Somebody messed it up a little. Technical difficulties.
We had some technical difficulties. Hopefully it's a one-time thing or a two-time thing, or it's not even going to be a constant thing. So just a little forewarning, and maybe it won't even happen. All that being said, thank you so much for listening and or watching, and we'll get you back to your regularly scheduled program. Right, Pat?
Absolutely. I'm waving. I didn't have any coffee today, Jeremy. I only had water. I broke my coffee grinder broke this morning.
I had some actual cold coffee, and Pat had some water, and Windell, you had nothing, and that's fine. We appreciate Windell about his Monster 6502.
It is beautiful, Jeremy. I've been looking at pictures during the whole coffee break.
Well, what is this exactly?
So this is another collaboration with Eric, and Eric did all of the circuit board design and layout on this. He is a very gifted electronic engineer, and this is a working model of an entire CPU microprocessor that is based entirely out of individual transistors soldered to one giant circuit board, and there are a lot of transistors on the circuit board.
And this circuit board looks like it's about as big as the motherboard in an Apple IIe. Maybe not exactly, but it's in the ballpark.
It's in the ballpark, yes. So it's about 7,000 times actual size, and it runs at 1/20th of the original speed. And the first question that most people ask is that because all the parts are so far apart? Is that because it's so big, propagation delays and so on? The answer is not really no. The original ran at a megahertz, and it's perfectly possible to make a circuit board this big where everything runs at a megahertz or faster. But the difference is that this is made with essentially discrete transistors. And discrete transistors are much bigger than the microscopic transistors that were on the original 6502 die, and they have a much larger capacitance. So we are essentially working with a bunch of power transistors and trying to use them as though they were the microscopic devices inside of an original IC. They do not work as fast. They are bigger. There's more charge to charge up the gate.
This is like the difference between my light switch back here and the big Frankenstein blade switch. What do you?
Windshield wipers? Is that what
knife switch.
What you're doing?
Knife switch. Yeah, it's like the.
I actually have a giant knife switch at our shop. With Evil Mad Scientist, we have to have some stuff, right? I have a giant knife switch on the wall. It's not wired up to anything. It's got all this exposed wiring. It would be far too dangerous. It's a terrible electronic analogy, but it's a perfect mechanical analogy to how long it takes to move that switch. Yes.
There's LEDs all over this thing, or do the LEDs correspond to?
Yeah, our model has hundreds more LEDs than the original IC did.
Yeah, it had none. Zero.
Exactly.
If I remember
It's
correctly.
terrible. So we put an LED on every latch bit, essentially every place where on the chip there's a 1 or a 0 stored at that moment to indicate what its state is. And there's also LEDs that indicate when one of the lines of the decode ROM is triggered. So if you look at this and you start digging into it, you'll start to learn a lot about how chips work. And there's a data path. There's a sort of 8 repeating structures at the bottom half of the board that go all the way across, where the things happen to the 8 bits on your bus. And you can see that there's 8 repeating structures in the arithmetic logic unit, the ALU, that there's repeating structures in the registers that store the different bits. There's a program counter that when you're stepping through slowly, you can see doing a ripple count going 1, 1, 0, 1, 1, 1, 0, 0, and so on. There's the place where the actual instruction being used is stored and decoded. There's different clock phases, so an instruction can take 1, 2, or more cycles to execute, and there's a little counter for that. There's a pre-decode that picks off the instruction and determines how many clock cycles it will take. And then there's a thing that looks at the instruction and actually decodes a numeric instruction into what does that actually do. And that's done with a giant lookup table, basically, which is a set of transistors in a grid at the top of the board. And then depending on what's decoded between what the instruction is and what the clock phase is, that triggers different logic lines that go into a gigantic mess of logic that controls a set of register bits, internal register bits, that determine the state of the machine and say what it actually does to the data on the next clock cycle. So it's sort of a huge set of things that you can look at and learn in great detail about, and even probe with a scope at specific places if you'd like to.
So is this, am I correct in, this is the first time I've really seen this, but am I correct in looking at this and saying basically it's like a chip, but it's expanded out and basically with lights on it so you can tell what's going. So it takes this literal black box and expands it out to something that you can literally see what the computer is doing. Is that on a bit by bit level? Is that a fair assessment?
Absolutely.
Of what's going on?
We'd sometimes call these disintegrated circuits.
That's awesome.
That really is awesome.
I and probably a lot of other people have an itch to buy this. What can we buy one, or is that coming up, or how's that going?
That is a question we've been trying to answer since 2016, and the answer is coming around to a yes again. So,
awesome.
As you may have heard, there was sort of a global catastrophe of semiconductor availability a couple years ago.
Yeah, it took some of my parts that we were designing from like $2 for a board up to like $15, $18 for a board. It threw off all our dynamics. It was horrible.
I've got an idea how you could put this out right now. You could base it on a Raspberry Pi, since those are.
You can just go to visual6502.org, and they have on that website a working Java or JavaScript simulation. I don't remember which simulation of the 6502, and you don't even need any hardware.
That's.
I
kind of want to hold it in my hands.
So one of the things about the 6502 is that it is just a microprocessor. It is not a computer. A microprocessor does not do anything unless it's in a computer motherboard, so to speak. So you need to have things like RAM, ROM, in order for it to be useful. So you also need a clock, and in order to be useful, you also are going to need things like some sort of input method, some sort of output method. So that could be, keyboard and monitor, for example, if you want to think about Apple II kinds of things. We need to have something to put that in. And our initial approach on the project was using vintage components, essentially the same sorts of components you'd find in an Apple II-like computer for a keyboard, monitor, and so on. That turned out to not work very well because of the low clock speed. If you want to register a keyboard press, it takes longer than it might expect with regular software that works for regular human timescales.
You have to hold the key down for a long time to get it to register.
Well, it's 1/20th the original speed, and if it can sense a key at your regular speed, that's not a huge difference, but it's enough to be really annoying. The second approach was to use a STM32-based computer, which essentially emulated all of those things I mentioned, the RAM, ROM, clock, keyboard, monitor, all in virtual space in a 32-bit ARM program. And that was great. It was coming along real good, and then suddenly those chips became unobtainable. So we've actually gone back to a very simple new approach, and what we're currently working on is a new motherboard that has a 555 timer and a ROM chip, and that's about it, and a RAM chip. And so it's really super minimal. What we're doing for the first release of the Monster 6502 is it's going to be built into this frame, and you can see the pictures on the monster6502.com website. The frame provides power input, and it has this little computer built into the back side. And so we have this square foot, give or take, sized CPU, wow, and this index card, give or take, sized motherboard that it plugs into. And
well, that's kind of
sort of
ironic.
A funny ratio.
Yeah.
And then there's in addition to the, quote, wire bond pads around the outside of the Monster 6502 circuit board, there's also a 50-pin connector. So the original 6502 is a 40-pin DIP chip. The 50-pin connector has those 40 pins of the DIP plus an additional 10 pins for power and ground, so it can feed the full 3 amps at 5 volts that the chip wants.
That's impressive.
And then we have this little, a lot of that is driving the LEDs and all of these big power transistors. It is a little power hungry for a chip, but a modern PC uses a lot more than that. Yeah. So we have a little motherboard that plugs into the back of that, and that has a 40-pin ribbon cable connector, DAL header on the backside that you can plug in a cable in that can go to a DIP chip shaped plug-in to your circuit board that has a socket for a 6502, or you can change out what's on that ROM directly.
I've been smiling the whole time. I've noticed. I keep looking over at you guys, then I see me, and I'm up here smiling because this is just delightful. This is fantastic.
Going back to something we, I guess, talked about. What do you think you'll sell this? So your main business is easy. Evil Mad Scientist Laboratories, and you think this is something where you sell stuff like this, like interesting electronics contraptions. Do you think this is something you'll eventually sell there? Or is that kind of, would that fit in there?
Yeah, we were originally thinking of doing this as a crowdfunding project, but we're currently tending towards, we're just going to do a short run of them as the first run and sell them on our website.
Nice. And that's, I guess that's a bit nerve-wracking, right? Because you've got to put in the money on it. You don't have it necessarily backed for sure, but I think people would probably buy it.
Yeah, it's a very expensive product. There's more than a reel of transistors on every board. It's just, it is, the bill of materials alone is very expensive, and the circuit board is very expensive. It's big and 4-layer and has to be good. And the assembly is expensive just because there's so many individual components to place, and if you figure a few cents a component, it really adds up fast.
So can you give us some estimate of what it would cost, or do you want to keep that under wraps for these right now?
I don't even have a good number that I could give you if I wanted to.
Okay. That's fair.
It's thousands, not hundreds.
Is it hundreds or thousands of dollars? Don't even... We'll just cut it out.
Yes,
if you don't want to
it's
answer,
thousands.
Yeah.
Well, I guess it's almost like it's transcended a DIY project to more of an art piece. I mean, you could see this at a museum or something.
We are not ever going to make a soldering kit version of this.
Okay, fair enough. Now, your company though, when were you guys EMSL? When was that started exactly? How long have you been doing that?
2007, so getting on 16 years now.
Nice.
Okay. And you guys have like an actual physical shop where you make stuff, and I assume you don't sell stuff out of the shop, but or maybe you do.
We haven't really done any in-person sales since COVID. We do have a small front showroom, but we don't have much of our stuff on display. We are almost entirely an online store. And yes, we have a physical shop where we do manufacturing. We have a milling machine. I have somebody running the milling machine today. We are making parts for our pen plotters. I have staff assembling machines, putting LEDs in bags for our kits, and building and testing robots.
Fantastic.
So so not just you and your wife. It's you have several employees, I assume. How big of a company are you?
We have about 10 employees right now, with a mix of full-time and part-time.
Okay, nice. And you're in Sunnyvale, California, right?
That's right.
And I think of one of our Patreons. I think Carl wanted to know, is that where Buffy the Vampire Slayer took place?
That is Sunnydale, completely different.
Okay, all right. I'll have to.
We're gonna have to yell at Carl for goofing that up.
We've answered that. So can you tell us
that hard-hitting question, Jeremy?
Yeah. Where am I going?
I have
Where
so
am I
many
even going
tabs
with
open for this cool stuff that I've lost our notes.
The Monster 6502 that we are hoping to get to a release soon. We are also working on our AxiDraw pen plotters, which is our primary line of business. We make these machines that people use for art and also for doing handwriting-like applications. A lot of the time, if you get what appears to be a handwritten envelope in the mail, that was written on one of our machines.
Really, because somebody said they were working on the gutters on my neighbors, and it looked like it was handwritten, and now I'm really disappointed that it was just on a pen plotter or maybe a copier.
Maybe.
No, I threw that in the trash.
So we're working on the next generation version of those right now as our top priority project. Just a moment here. I have a small felon trying to steal a pen from my desk.
Uh-oh.
Oh, is that
Zener.
I forgot the name. I want to say
That's
Shotki,
not
but
Zener.
right.
I'm at home today with different cats.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we gotta. I understand how that goes.
I can do a cat cameo if you need it.
Yeah, we'd love to see the cat. Although.
Okay, just a sec. Setting down microphone.
Oh, look at you.
Look at
Luna.
that.
Hello,
She
Luna.
Cats get to be. Hey, look. Camera's up here. There you go.
Yeah,
It's a
they never know where the
surprisingly
cameras
obedient
are. I always
Nice.
had
Yeah,
trouble
Luna's
with
a nice looking. I guess dark gray, not quite black, but dark gray and white kitty.
tuxedo.
Oh, and look at
lights.
that.
Look
Haley.
at the size of you.
That doesn't look like a cat. That looks like a. Is that a lynx or is that a cat?
She's a Maine Coon cat, and she is genuinely twice the mass of the other cat.
Yeah. Well, are you sure that's not a? Are you sure that's not a dog?
That's
Or
actually
a small
small.
small wolf.
Oh, she is beautiful. Look at that.
Wow, that is great. Yeah, it's got some nice pointy ears. It looks like. It really does look like something that. Well, looks like something you might see stalking around in your backyard, hunting rabbits or something. Yeah, actually, I saw a bobcat outside my window like quite a while ago, and I think it was smaller than the cat you have there. Which is, that's pretty cool. So if we break into your house, we don't have to worry about the guard dog. We have to worry about the giant cat, which
I
sounds
doubt
even more
that.
terrifying.
I doubt that unless you smell like cat food, they're going to be interested.
Oh, well. So don't break into the house if you have just been feeding a bunch of cats and then.
All right, I've gotten you way off topic from your
That's okay.
podcast.
No,
notes.
it's okay. It's regular listeners will know this about how it goes sometimes.
The internet loves pets.
I did want to mention, I was thinking about it, and you were mentioning the giant, the monster 6502, and I should give a shout out to episode 49 where we had Zachary Hips at Bite Size, and he had the gigantic Arduino, right?
Yeah. Yeah, Zach has the big Arduino. I think he has a big pie, too. It's about, 3
I think
feet
so.
by 4 feet or something.
Yeah. So
Functional.
that's our.
I think he just has the actual there's an actual Arduino inside hidden somewhere, but all the pins are broken out. It's adorable.
It's an interesting theme. I'm pretty sure we've had other guests that have had gigantic versions of other things on. I don't know. I feel like maybe Matt Perks or Prodigy maybe did something similar to that, but I don't know. Well, I guess since we're a little bit off topic from the electronics field, Pat, I feel like there was something you were wanting to ask me about.
Oh, I do. I want to know. I saw that awesome short you had on YouTube yesterday with your washing machine repair. What went wrong there?
Yeah, so what went wrong? Which I've got a family of 5. So if the washing machine breaks, it's a problem, immediate problem. Yeah, pretty much. So I was like, oh, it's not working. Basically, the water was not draining, and so I had to basically drain all the water out. Took it out to the garage, and I could tell something was not right. It was like a motor was stalling or something. Flipped it over, watched another YouTube video where the guy basically said, okay, this is what happens. You got to change the drain impeller. So I flipped it over, and honestly, taking it out of the garage, into the garage, and flipping it over was the hardest part of the project, because I ordered a new part from Amazon. There the next day, unbolted a few things, bolted it right on, and it was, just pretty much worked. So that was good. The thing that kind of terrified me, though, when I hooked it back up, starts running, and I look at it, a couple minutes later, it's not getting any of the clothes wet. So instead of draining it, now it's not getting any water in. And I was like, what is going on? And Pat, Windell, do you think you guys have any idea what might have been the problem?
Well, I know what the problem was because I saw the video. So I don't want to cheat.
Well, what about you? You have any guesses what might have been the problem?
From that description, not at all.
Okay, so the problem was I forgot to turn the faucets back on after I, because you gotta disconnect it, turn the faucets off that lead into it. Otherwise, you're gonna flood your house and have more problems than a broken washing machine.
Jeremy, so I can't tell you who this was, but it was my brother-in-law. He bought a brand new house. Nobody had ever lived in it before. This was 15 years ago. He was putting in his washer and dryer, and he turned the faucet on, and a few seconds later, or maybe right after he tried to test run the washer, water just starts spraying everywhere. The hose came loose. He didn't have it on tight enough, and it's just, spray. What do you do when that happens, Jeremy?
I'd hopefully shut it off.
Well, that was not what he thought to do. He grabbed the hose, he looked around, and he just put it in his mouth. He put it into his mouth. Yeah.
Look at that. Feet actually blanked out. It was so... You see that, Pat? It would blank.
And it did not work. Guys, it did not. Don't do that. It was the wrong... He said
how
it tasted...
people die.
Yeah, it was... Well, I don't think he put it in his mouth. Like, he thought he could drink this like a cartoon or something. But then he figured out what he had to do. But he made a big mess before. He ended up having to replace a lot of the ceiling because it got all...
Wow. That's interesting. I guess if you listen to the podcast, you won't be too happy with you.
It's good when he tells the story because he makes the face and he, does the whole putting the pipe up to the... Yeah, it's... I'm glad you didn't have to do that, Jeremy. I'm relieved.
I did not do that. Although you saw the video apparently, like when I was testing out in the garage, I had like a tiny little bucket, like a sand bucket, to like test the thing, and the water knocked that over, obviously. So, but all things considered, I was pretty happy with myself. My wife was happy, and she's like, "Oh, that's great, you got it done." I was thinking I could tell her that it was really hard, but this is actually really easy. So, I guess that's fine. I don't know. I was honest.
Well, you did a good job, Jeremy. That's what counts.
Thank you, Pat.
I'm proud.
Now I
of
hear
you.
you have some. I heard you have some plumbing issue too. Maybe your coffee machine.
Oh yeah. Well, I broke my coffee grinder this morning. I'm very disappointed.
So what did you do? Did you like take the coffee in a rolling pin or?
No. Well, I fixed. The coffee grinder has the thing that holds the burr in. There's a little plastic doodad, and that's supposed to break if if a rock got in there or something. Instead of destroying your expensive burrs, it's supposed to break the plastic thing, and that didn't quite work the way it's supposed to. It goofed up the burrs. I was able to pull a couple of shots of espresso, but I had to put it down to the absolute minimum setting, and that's just not going to work. It'll have to hold me over, but I ordered an expensive grinder.
You didn't throw all the coffee grinds into your mouth or whatever?
I did not. No. I did not throw all the coffee in my mouth when it did not work.
Does your grinder not have replacement burrs available?
They do, but I've replaced the burrs twice. They're only $15 for the top burr that I keep breaking. But I've done it twice so far, and I'll be up over $50 in burrs this year. Well, not within the last 12 months or so. And I feel dumb if I'm going to keep doing that. So I figured I've had the grinder for 8 years. It's time for an upgrade. There's cooler, nicer, fancier grinders for not much more money than I paid for my grinder. I don't know if I'm supposed to tell everybody what I bought. I bought a Turin DF64P. I don't know why it's a P. P is for espresso, apparently.
Is that from the same place that the Shroud of Turin?
It could be. It's spelled the same, I believe. I don't really know that much about it, other than it's pretty reasonably priced for a flat burr espresso grinder.
Okay. Well, it's funny. I feel like the both of you are fairly big coffee aficionados, but I get my coffee from the can from Costco, from the cold coffee. I don't even like hot coffee.
The cold coffee can. What?
Yeah, a cold coffee can. I should.
You should register that domain. You could.
Coldcoffeecan.com. Yeah. Well, on that note, is there anything else you'd like to talk about today that we haven't asked you about? Is there anything you want to know about your business or yourself or the world, if you feel like?
Nothing comes to mind, but I'm happy to answer any more questions or discuss random stuff if you'd like to.
Well, that you probably don't have all day, but
I would love to hear about your coffee setup if you're a coffee geek. I
have a Rancilio Rocky grinder and a Silvano, quick mill Silvano espresso machine.
Ooh, I don't know that. I have the Sylvia. I've had her for about 8 years.
Well, the Silvano is a Sylvia killer, so we are enemies.
Yeah. Oh, real? I want to. I need to. I'm gonna be looking that up.
I once told that to a person named Sylvia, and she didn't know what to think of that. We primarily brew coffee that my partner Lenore roasts. So we have a.
I roast coffee too.
We get to the usually single origin Guatemalan beans from Sweet Maria's wholesale site, Coffee Shrub. So we get these 50-pound sacks of green Guatemalan coffee beans and roast them. We have a 1-pound drum roaster and makes pretty good coffee.
Oh, I'm a little jealous. I'm still using an air popper. And I keep thinking I'm going to upgrade to a drum roaster, but I haven't moved on to that. I haven't moved on that far yet. But
just lets you roast a little less often, which is kind of nice. And,
yeah.
That's sort of a week's supply of coffee at once. And let's see what else. Oh, and I just replaced the burrs in our Rocky a couple weeks ago. It's like $50 for a set of these hardened steel burrs, and they are fantastic quality.
Awesome. The Rocky was one of the grinders I was looking at when I bought my machine 8 years ago. I ended up with the Baratza Preciso. I don't remember exactly why I chose the Preciso instead of the Rocky. It's been too long, but I'm excited. We have people on the podcast all the time, and nobody else has an espresso machine, so I'm very excited.
Well, that's very nice. Yeah, this is a subject that I feel I'm almost entirely ignorant about, to be honest. But it's which is fine.
Yeah, I'm a little jealous that you order the 50-pound bags. I just order a 2-pound bag. I order like a dozen 2-pound bags at a time and just try new things constantly.
It
fun.
keeps quite well as green beans.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, years instead of weeks. It's fantastic.
Well, where now, if we wanted to find you or your products or anything else, where's the best place to find you, Windell?
At EvilMadScientist.com.
Okay, excellent. And yeah, you can find all kinds of stuff. You can find the AxiDraw. Is that correct? That's
correct. Our family of pen plotters.
And all kinds of other interesting electronics devices and such. And of course, you could find his book there, Open Circuits. That's fantastic. And find that on Amazon too, if you so prefer. I suppose
it's $10 or $12 off on Amazon right now. It says when I
nice.
checked. If anybody's interested.
Yeah. And
Pat, or you can order from No Starch and get the no DRM ebook versions with it, which is a nice thing too.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah, maybe I got that. Maybe I should have sent that to you if I have a copy. I'm not sure. Yeah, and you can find me jeremyscook.com, or I'm at Twitter at jeremyscook, or YouTube at Jeremy Cook, where you can find see how I repaired my washing machine recently. That was a short video and a literal short, as they like to call it these days. Pat, where can we find you?
Oh, you can pretty much go to patshead.com and it'll have links to all my stuff there.
Well, yeah, we enjoyed having you on so much, and yeah, hope you have a great rest of your morning there, and I'll have Pat and I will both have a good afternoon, hopefully.
All right. Well, it was a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thanks so much. So
you don't have to hang up. You can, just because we're hitting stop. You can. We're not trying to. But I'm gonna hit the button.
Oh, don't forget to wait till it uploads. That's we
do. Well, he's at 99%. He's doing a good job, Jeremy. I'm so excited about the Monster 6502. I'm so excited.